Hello, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst for Digital Transformation and Mobility here at Cognizant, and I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm so happy because I have as my guest today Ved Sen, and Ved is the Head of Advisory Services for Social, Mobile, and Analytics for Cognizant, which makes him my peer and my colleague who's out of the Paddington office in the UK. Thanks for joining us, Ved.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, everybody.
So I asked Ved if he would join me today because I've recently finished or finalized a report called the Real-Time Mobile Infrastructure Report, in which I interviewed over 80 IT and business professionals that are involved in mobile projects, and I asked them a series of questions about where they see challenges. And I wanted just to review some of that data, and for those of you that are regular followers of the work that I do, I'm publishing all these findings in charts and analysis in a series of articles on my blog and on the Center for the Future of Work's blog as well. So I hope you can tune in there or visit there and review some of those. But Ved, it's late. We better get going. What time is it there in the
It's
UK?
just about, it's going to be 10 o'clock soon.
10 o'clock. So are the kids in bed?
Yes.
All right. So what was the weather like in the UK?
All except me.
All except you. We'll keep it quiet. We'll keep our voices down.
We're good. We're good.
So what's the weather like today there, Ved?
Yeah, it's been clear and crisp. So spring is here. It's I would say it's good weather for this time of the year.
All right. Well, let me just review then. Again, I just finished this paper called Real-Time Mobile Infrastructure, and let me just jump right into it. The first question I asked the survey participants was how important will having optimized mobile applications and user experiences be to the future success of your business? So how important is it there to have optimized mobile applications and user experiences? So that the data that I came up with and the results here said that 70% of participants answered it's very important to very important. Does that align with what your expectations are, Ved?
Yeah, I'm looking at your pie chart here, and I think certainly, mobile first has become, an almost, it's almost a given now. We no longer debate it in a lot of industries. I was with a financial services client today, and for them it was almost the starting point of any discussion that we will be mobile first. So yes, obviously it is a bit varied from industry to industry, but if you're in retail or retail finance or anything that is significantly consumer facing, and also especially if you're service oriented, if you tick these two boxes, then you're pretty much, it's right up there. It's probably, those guys are probably at the 90% mark.
Yes.
Yeah, you
so
may have players on the other end.
So let me just break down those answers because I held back a secret there. So 27% said, yeah, it's important to have those optimized mobile apps in their business. 43% said, yes, it's very important. And 30% said it's critical to the future success of their business. And I would agree with you. I see in retail and any of those really customer-facing ones, that's just critical to have that optimized app. Ved, from your perspective, what does it actually take to optimize a mobile app?
I think, this could be a long answer, but I'll try and break it up into some, the straightforward points and a couple of perhaps less obvious ones. The straightforward ones are clearly you absolutely have to start with user experience and user journeys. You have to take a service design view and look at the whole end-to-end experience. It's not just what happens in the app, but it is what happens from the time you pick up your phone to the entire experience of downloading and using the app and logging in and finishing the transaction. You have to consider things like the Omni-Channel environment where you might do a piece of the, your activity on the app, but the rest of it might be on a mobile device or on a website or on a branch or any other, on a phone call perhaps, and it still has to work as seamlessly. And needless to say, the architecture, the security, these are all the must-haves in the environment anyway. But perhaps less understood is the need for things like good API management, how well you connect to your backend systems, which then allows your app to be a little bit more agile, allows you to add features more quickly, how you integrate into a DevOps environment, which is currently, I guess, quite a critical aspect of development. These are some of the less understood pieces of the story. And of course, I would always argue as a business person first that fundamentally this is a product, and so you have to always wear the product management hat and ask the really difficult questions about what's important to my consumer, what's important to my user, how am I measuring it? Are you looking at analytics every day and trying to understand what people like, dislike, what they find easy or not so easy with your application? Because whatever we do, the chances are we will always get a few things right and a few things wrong, and it's really important that we keep fine-tuning pretty much every other day.
Oh, yeah, and you might have heard different numbers, Ved, but I've heard two different recent reports. One said that if an application takes longer than 3 seconds to use, people will close it and move on. Another one was a little bit more liberal, and they said if it takes more than 10 seconds to load, people will leave, and they're unlikely to ever return to that mobile app. They'll just delete it and go either to a different app or a different website, etc. Have you heard any other kinds of information around that?
I think sometimes those numbers, obviously we have to be a little bit guarded, because if it is your bank, it's not that easy to say, well, I'm going to, just go somewhere else. So if it's an existing service relationship with your bank, with your utility company, then you are almost, you're sort of stuck if the app doesn't work really well, and it may be a big factor in switching providers, but that's, I guess, an extreme step. But very clearly, you are incurring a bad customer experience, customer dissatisfaction, and it's one more reason to lose a customer if that's the experience you're offering. I think though, if the what is the expectation you set? I think if you let the customer know we're doing something new, or there's an enormous value we're delivering to you, and for that you may need to wait for a few seconds extra. You may get away with that. The Financial Times app, as an example, every time you open it, it tries to connect back with the Financial Times database and upload to the latest version. So that always takes a few seconds. But because the content is valuable, we're okay sort of waiting for that. So I think it is a bit context and value dependent. But I would agree with you that in general, the level of tolerance is very low. And indeed, if your app is not a part of an existing relationship, then that 3 second or a few second rule may well apply.
Oh yeah, because I can imagine some products that are available on many different sites, and so if one site's taking too long, you're going to move to the next that perhaps is a lot more optimized. Exactly. Great. Let's move on to the next question here. The next question, number 2 here that I ask is the demand for mobile apps forcing IT departments to rethink and change how they have designed and architected their IT infrastructure, processes, and systems? So are mobile apps actually forcing the IT department to rethink just about everything they're doing? So here's the answers. The data reveals that the demand for mobile application development and support is forcing the majority, which is about 80% of IT departments, to rethink and alter the way they design and architect their IT infrastructures, processes, and systems. Does that align with what you see out in the marketplace there in Europe, Ved?
Yes, I'm just trying to slice that answer again in a couple of ways. Obviously, it is a bit industry dependent, but I do know of service providers who have completely reshaped, not just, it's not minor tinkering. I know of at least one company I spoke to recently that has completely done away with corporate IT. There is no corporate IT anymore. So without giving too much away, it is in the media and entertainment space, and therefore its products are largely virtual. It doesn't actually sell you something physical. Therefore, it's a little bit easier, I guess. But having said that, they've completely broken up the IT team by product line. So each product line has its own IT. So you lose something by way of efficiency, because you're going away from a shared services model. But clearly they've weighed it up, and they feel that the speed to market and some of the agility benefits greatly outweigh those losses of a few points of efficiency in the kind of structure they've drawn up. So this is a very radical change. But to your point, certainly pretty much everybody I've met is either asking the question or has already decided to make changes within the IT team and structure to be able to accommodate mobile and related digital technologies.
Oh yeah, I do a lot of I have a lot of discussions and do a lot of work and speaking in SAP environments, and it's just so interesting. Very few SAP environments are all SAP. A lot of them have many other kinds of systems and best of breed in there. But between all of those systems, sometimes well, most of the time, they weren't originally developed with mobility in mind. So now they're asked to retrofit the way they operate to support an impatient mobile consumer, and sometimes that overstresses the IT system. It's just not intended for that.
Yeah, I mean, you're closer to SAP than I am, Kevin. So you probably you probably have a much better pulse on the market. But from everything I've heard, SAP themselves are pretty much reshaping their entire landscape. So where you had a scenario where a large company may have 25 different installations of SAP across the world, they are now in the next few years they will have one cloud-based instance which will serve their entire global base. So it's a completely different model, and when you make that kind of transition, then of course you're going to rethink how many people do I need maintaining servers, and how many people do I need on service provision. And all those things. So it will be a very, very different landscape. Even if you are a very dyed-in-the-wool SAP shop, it still means you will have a very significantly different IT environment in 5 years' time.
Oh yeah, and if you look at SAP as the kind of the database of record, if you would, the business back-end business system. Nowadays it used to be that they were the back-end system for the retail, the corporate arm of the retail. But nowadays, ever since the internet came, and now especially with mobile devices and mobile apps, SAP finds that they're being asked to be the back end to a consumer application. And so suddenly their performance isn't just working with the accounting team and finance team and HR team and supply chain management team, where they're willing to wait because it's part of their daily job out of the cubicle. No, this is a mobile customer or consumer holding an iPhone on a subway, and they're wanting to know and track a product, and they're using SAP on the back end of their mobile app, and they're impatient. So it really changes the dynamic of what the expectations are and what needs to be the performance level that needs to come out of the IT environment.
Absolutely, and the moment you look at consumer-facing using what has been designed for an enterprise application, you have two big challenges. One is that you don't control the environment, so you have very little control over the actual experience, and you have to make those extra allowances. And even if the person is going through a bad signal phase, you have to be graceful in your degradation of the user interface. But equally, the other challenge you face is, we've all seen this in the website world, that you have no idea what's going to happen if some event triggers a spike in your usage. For some reason,
Let's
everyone.
Move on to question number 3, and thank you for those answers, Ved, and your thoughts there. Question number 3: Are your mobile strategies and plans inhibited, or your clients' mobile strategies and plans inhibited or limited because of the current IT environment, infrastructure, or design? So, I'm just asking them if they look at their own, or if they're on contract working at some customer site, is that IT environment that they find themselves, the survey participants, is that IT environment, is it somehow inhibited or limited today because of the IT environment? So the answers here: 7% were not sure, 15% said no, there's no limitation or nothing's inhibiting our work today, but 78% said yes, I'm finding today my current IT environment limits or inhibits my plans and strategies for mobility. Now, have you heard similar kinds of things in Europe there, Ved?
Yeah, I think this is common across the world, right? We talked about how we talked about consumers earlier, but exactly the same consumer grade technology is what now every employee uses. So there is a dissonance there as well because the employee also expects the same kind of consumer grade service with enterprise systems now. So yes, they don't get it. They're not happy. Increasingly, in many companies, employees, unless they're in highly regulated environments, banks or government sectors, for example, in lots of large companies, employees have already migrated away from corporate systems to non-corporate environments to get work done. So there are all these things happening, in that space. But equally for IT technology managers and the services that they are trying to deliver, they're also hamstrung by their legacy. Things that don't move as quickly, things that have been built for a different era, and have a completely different clock speed of change.
Oh, absolutely. I've been reading this last weekend, in fact, how the mobile apps are becoming more popular, and more of the online transactions and the overall amount of transactions and sales for retail products are moving over to mobile applications. So, and we can all see the writing on the wall. That's not going to go away. We see that increasing as time goes by. So, this is a wake-up call to businesses out there that if they have those IT environments that are inhibiting or limiting the plans and strategies for moving quickly to optimize and create mobile apps that will drive the sales today and tomorrow, they better get on the bandwagon and start budgeting right about now. That's my perspective anyway, Ved.
Yeah, I think you've asked this question somewhere down the line in your survey, so I may be jumping the gun here, but really there are plenty of strategies for how you can sort of build your IT strategy in a way that you can create those layers of this is my system of record, here's my middle tier, which is my API gateway and API strategy. And API strategy has become almost a de facto feature of an IT environment now. And then I have my front end, which is this omni-channel. Customer can choose whichever mode you want to interact with the organization. So I think that's where I think the most amount of planning and investment needs to be going right now.
Got it. Thank you for that, Ved. Question number 4. Will the demand for mobile applications force enterprises to make major investments in their IT environment to better support real-time interactions with mobile apps? So, it's really about what do you expect is going to happen to your IT budget? Does there need to be, will there be major investment to actually support a mobile environment? And 10% said no, but 83% said yes. They absolutely expect major investments to be required and to be done to support ongoing development around mobility. Where do you think, let me ask you kind of a follow-up question to that, Ved, where do you think most of that investment is going to have to be?
That's a very interesting question. I think that it'll be split between, when we talk about mobile, we are talking about systems of engagement. So unlike in traditional IT, the success does not depend on whether you got the process right. It only depends on whether you got the engagement right. And the engagement is a slippery animal. It can't be over-engineered. You have to be able to talk to the customer, the consumer, the user in a way that truly makes sense, and maybe even I would say creates an emotional connect with the user. And emotion in IT is a very alien concept. So I think a significant amount of investment, a new investment, has to go into understanding that engagement layer and how we can actually create stickiness with those applications with the end user. Secondly, we are going to see this continuous explosion at the device level. And when I say device, I loosely mean device. It could be phones, it could be wearables, it could be any number of other sensor-based environments, connected cars, all of those things. So you've got this huge growth in the actual um, layer at which you actually connect to the end user. So the device layer is going to be another significant area of investment, because as a service provider, you will need to be there on all those different platforms and manage that quite well. And the third piece, therefore, is that we still have a fragmented operating system environment. So you're in the foreseeable future, I don't see Android or iOS going away. And so you're going to have to continuously invest in both those platforms. And then obviously finally in your API layer again, or the middle tier, which is how you expose services.
Got it. So let me step out of the survey for just a moment. You mentioned earlier, Ved, the concept of Omni-Channel.
Yeah.
And my understanding of the Omni-Channel, and the way I discuss it is, if you call the call center on a phone, you want them to have the same information that you saw on a website, that you saw on the mobile app, that the sales associate in the retail environment was able to see when they looked up your account. You want that same level of information, the same kind of look and feel and experience, no matter how you choose to interact with that particular vendor. And it's very frustrating for a customer if they see one set of information and pricing and shipment information on a mobile app, and it's different from what the call center says, and it's different from what you see on the website. So, and I've experienced that before. I recognize the challenges with that. But on the back end, what that means is that all of these systems are going to have to potentially rethink the way they process information, the speed in which they process information, and the way that present that information out to the client, so it is a consistent view across it. Is that how you understand it, Ved?
Yes, to all of that, but there's an additional layer which makes it even harder. It's not just that they have to be offer the same experience, whichever channel you choose, but they also have to be able to hand over to each other. Because I might start my journey by talking to the bank on the website, but then I might need to follow up on that same conversation, and I might do that on the mobile phone, on an app, and then I might call the call center. And each of those jumps, I'm expecting that the information I've already shared with respect to this transaction has now moved across. I don't have to want to explain the same problem to the bank or to the utility company over and over again with each new channel. So it's not just that they have to be able to offer the same experience, but they also have to be able to handle a single transaction in an environment where I'm switching between channels in the course of that transaction.
Wow. So question number 5, what percentage of your or your client's back office systems are not optimized today to support mobile applications? The answer was 60% or more said that their IT systems are not optimized. So 60% of the IT systems, according to the survey respondents, that they have are not optimized. So they would say that 40% are optimized, but 60% are not. So that represents a lot of work. How would you even start with that, Ved?
First of all, the number is not surprising, actually, simply because the pace of change has clearly become faster than the replacement cycle of your IT assets. You buy things keeping in mind a 3 to 5 year life cycle over which you will depreciate an asset. And then in that 3 to 5 years, the landscape has changed so much that that whole model has become quite difficult to sustain. So I think there's a model change that's required. So how do we prevent, first of all, from this problem hitting us again in another couple of years? So we've got to stop thinking in 3 to 5 year cycles. Some of that may be enabled by virtualization, by just moving to a service model as opposed to an asset-based model. So I get platform as a service, I get middleware as a service, and that helps me to build shorter cycles of planning because I'm not stuck to a long-term model of investment. But if you already have that environment, I guess the 3 strategies include: A, moving to a quick virtualization model; B, boxing or boxing off the back-end system from the front end through a middleware, which then allows you to make changes to either the back end or the front end without impacting the other. And C, opening up your data through APIs to potentially third parties who can do more with it, perhaps than your own resources allow you to. And this may vary based on the kind of company that you are. But if you're, for example, um, a public service or a railway system, then you're probably quite happy for some other people to come in and build some clever applications that are user friendly on your data, rather than you're having to invest in every single piece of that environment.
Wow. So, Ved, some time ago I was speaking at a conference on a panel next to a Forrester analyst, and this Forrester analyst said to me, he said, I wouldn't doubt whether mobility and mobile apps are going to force companies to have to upgrade, update, replace their back-end IT infrastructure to the degree it may surpass the investment required to install the ERP in the first place. Now, those were some dramatic words. Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
It's hard to argue with, someone from Forrester who's probably done the homework and analysis of that. It doesn't seem out of place, though, that this is a really big change. The ERP level was all about normalization. It was about standardization of back-end processes, and it obviously delivered a huge step forward. But you can easily argue that this is as big a change. It's happening at a faster rate, and it's applying to a larger user base. So all of those things would suggest that your investment may need to be even higher to achieve the kind of results you're looking to do.
Yeah, so question number 6 of the survey was really about how many of you, if you look at your inventory of back-end systems, have systems that are simply incapable of supporting real-time mobility. 84% said some of their systems in their inventory are simply incapable of being in a real-time environment and supporting the needs of a mobile application. What you hope is that perhaps those systems aren't required to interact with mobility, but I have to think that some of them, just by odds, are going to be necessary components of real-time business processes, and it's going to impact. So I could see where you're just going to be forced. You're either going to have to make a decision of using some different system, going to a cloud-based environment for that, or somehow recreating an environment that can operate much quicker than the legacy system was originally designed to support.
And that doesn't again sound out of the realm of expectations to me, because it is fundamentally a bit of a chicken and egg there, because I don't think a lot of businesses recognize the power of real-time information till it was actually made available to them.
Yes.
And now that it's been made available, and there's a surge in the demand for that kind of information, we are finding that the systems aren't really geared up to support, the kind of demand we are now seeing.
Oh yeah, I mean, if we look at some of the capabilities of the mobile app, which make it so much different and better than you would have experienced on a desktop web environment, it's the fact that you're mobile. You actually are moving in many cases, and you're looking at information, and the window for actually using that information to your advantage is very small. It might be in the morning commuting to work, you want a coffee shop wants to run mobile marketing campaign that will send you a coupon inviting you to stop at their coffee shop and have breakfast, right? Well, your window for actually doing that is quite narrow, especially if it's utilizing location-based services, so it knows when you're getting close, and it knows when to send the ad, and all these things. So when you look at a mobile environment and a time-sensitive environment in these windows of opportunity, if you have slow systems, you can't take advantage of any of those kind of sensors or location-aware sensors in the context-aware applications that are built to take advantage of those.
No, you're right, and I'll give you a counterexample as well, where traditionally the way we used to do banking was once a week on a weekend. Spend 45 minutes sorting out all your various payments and moving money around accounts, all of that. And obviously that's changed now, and we all pretty much now dip in and out maybe once a day and we do perform individual tasks. But the challenge for the bank is that earlier it had you for 45 minutes to then cross-sell and upsell a bunch of other stuff. It could expose you to ads, it could talk about new products, and you could probably spend a few seconds looking at an ad. Now we are saying, pretty much in the same way that you just outlined, that your consumer will come in to your mobile app, perform his or her task, and be out in under 3 minutes. Because all the person wants to do is maybe pay a bill or check a credit card balance or an account balance. And now you as a bank have to figure out a way of cross-selling and upselling in that 3-minute space rather than in the 45-minute space. And that's quite a big difference again. And so again, we go back to the real-time environment of saying, do we know what you're doing right now, or do we have a good estimate of why you're checking your balance now? Are you going into a shop? Can we combine some of those data points, if we have permission to use them, into giving you an offer that says, it looks like you're going to XYZ bank, or you're going to XYZ store. Would you like, us to make you, would you like a loan if you're going into durable store, for example? Some of that, obviously, on the spur of the moment, you think of examples which sound very intrusive, but I think the bigger point is that you are going to have to react in that kind of time span.
Absolutely. That leads us right into the last question we'll kind of cover today. Question number 7 was, will your or your client's IT environment and back office systems prevent you from delivering an optimized mobile application experience? So, will the current IT environment prevent you from optimizing that mobile application and user experience? 43% answered yes, indeed. Their current IT environment will prevent them from being able to present an optimized user experience. So again, as we see that the usage numbers and the popularity of mobile commerce and just the predicted increasing role of mobile apps in commerce altogether means that that's got to be fixed, or there's going to be big problems.
And again, we've seen that play itself out over and over again. We sort of, I think, we saw the pattern with the web that, there were big stumbling blocks. We couldn't handle spikes, we couldn't handle scale, we couldn't handle response times, and then all of those problems were solved over time. And it took about 5 to 6 years, I think, for the engineering to catch up with the kind of success the web enjoyed. And I think it's normal human behavior to sort of apply the same logic to a mobile device and expect that the web architecture will work for mobile phone, but of course it doesn't, because there are lots of new challenges. The web spoiled us in a way. We just had to worry about the browser, and you never had to ask the question: are you going to be watching it or following my website on a Dell machine or on an IBM PC?
Yes.
But of course, in the mobile environment, you do have to ask the question: what is your operating system? What is a version of your operating system? What device are you using? What kind of screen resolution do you have? And then beyond that, you also have to ask: are you still sitting or standing? Do you have a one-handed experience because you're also using your other hand for something else? Hopefully not driving, but perhaps
you're holding on to the subway as you're going down the tracks.
Or you're drinking coffee, or or you're holding an umbrella for all you know. So
yes.
So these are different experiences, and therefore you're also having to deal with someone whose mind is not 100% on. You're not sitting down and focusing on one screen. So all of this means that it is a very different way of thinking, and to deliver that kind of experience, to deliver that kind of thought-through, end-to-end, optimized experience, takes a lot of new thinking, and I think the IT challenge is only a part of it, but certainly it's a significant part of it, and it's certainly not available today. The kind of response times, the kind of development time scales, and the kind of data availability you may need to deliver the optimized experience we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. So we've got the context of where you're at, what you're doing, what's around you. Are you using a one-handed experience? Are you commuting? Are you driving a car? So all of those kinds of considerations. But we've also done a ton of research here at Cognizant in our Center for the Future Work. And last year we published a book called Code Halos. The whole notion of code halos is that every one of us is encircled or surrounded by data about what we like, who we are, what our preferences are, what our buying history is, all of our clicks and swipes on our mobile devices, what do we like, what do we don't like. So all that information is around us as well, plus where we're at, and if we're using a one-handed experience. All of this data in real time needs to, as much as possible, be gathered and understood, so then we can present back a very personal experience for you on that mobile app. And that's taking advantage of what we call a code halo strategy. We know all this information about you. How can we present a user experience just for you? And again, that puts a burden on back-end systems to be able to not only collect, process, analyze, and present that information so quickly that it impacts the way we load and present information on a mobile app. That takes a lot of resources, doesn't it, Ved?
Yeah, and if I can break up the code halo model into two steps. I mean, it's like a boxer. You're always taught to, do the combination, right? You do the left and the right. So the left and right here is that you want to get that data and the context, so that you can serve better contextualized and optimized application experiences. But you can only get the data if you start by engaging me in the first place. Because if you don't engage me, I don't give you the data, and you don't get to the second. You don't get the second shot. So the step one is to be able to build a strong engagement layer, so that I, as a consumer, am willing to engage with you. And the more digital touch points we create, the more data we get to then enable that second layer of customized service. So in a Starbucks kind of example or a coffee shop example, I might get you to use your mobile phone to sort of give me a combination of, or make your own coffee, and you may have your preferred version of your cappuccino or your latte with the right kind of milk and the right kind of foam and all of that. But by getting you to do that, what I'm also doing is I'm getting the richer data about when you transact, how often you drink coffee, what are your timings, what are your patterns, and that's how I actually get to the code halo. It's not just about the simple transaction of, okay, I know your preferences, so I can serve the preference better. But by getting you to engage with me on a digital platform, I start to generate a lot richer information about you in the context of a transaction. I'm not trying to, figure out your bank details or what you do on your, how you travel. But in this coffee transaction, I can get a much better sense of your pattern. I may figure out that you actually don't work on Fridays, or you don't drink coffee on Fridays because you don't come to my coffee shop, and so maybe I can give you an offer to have a coffee on Fridays. So there are all these things that are at play, but I think that this step one, step two is really important, and the combination requires, first of all, maximizing your digital touch points, and the Code Halo book actually touches upon this. You need to create an inventory of all your digital touch points, and then you can start maximizing the data that you get out of each of those touch points.
Oh yeah, but none of that matters if you can't use that in a manner that benefits the end customer and that experience.
Yeah.
And that means that you have to process all of that, all those processes, business processes, and all that information quick enough, which points us right back to that challenge of making sure that our IT environment and the business processes supported by those are fast enough to operate in this mobile environment. Ved, I want to thank you so much for joining us today from the UK, where you should be in bed, but thank you for staying up long enough to share your wisdom and insights with us, Ved.
Thank you. I'm not going to be able to sleep now, you see, because I'm now wired. I'm thinking about all of this, so I'm not going to be lying in bed and thinking about what did Kevin really mean about that.
Well, you know what? There's nothing quicker to put you to sleep, though, than to read some of my blog articles. With that, thank you so much for joining us today, Ved.
Thanks, Kevin.